I am Graham, a trucker who reads a lot of books. My goal is to be a full-time author and illustrator. You're helping me get there by watching this video, so thanks. Now on to the video. Today I listened to an audiobook that is the first in a series. It was recommended for fans of, I can't remember what. It was something else that I liked. Just like, oh, if you like this, you might like that. That okay, I looked into it, I tried it out. And I'm going to give it a hard 3 stars, which is a recommendation. I think there's a lot to recommend this book. I think there's also a fair amount counting against it, but it could be one of those things where you have a different experience with it than I do. The book is called ASHLORDS. It is a fantasy race novel, and that was of interest to me because I just wrote and published one of those in Howling Wilderness. I don't feel like there are enough of those, and I was curious to see what another writer would do to tackle this idea. It's set in like a made-up world. There's a kind of a post-apocalyptic feeling. Actual gods have arisen in the world and have reset the order of things, and every year people from different realms get to compete in this race where they ride phoenix horses. And like the horses are reborn of ash every single day. Like you got to keep track of the ashes at night, and then like the horse respawns the next day. Like a really cool in-world concept for sure. The main characters, there are 3 of them. There are 2 girls. There's an Imelda and a Pippa, and then there's a boy named Adrian. And they all, understandably, end up in this race, this Ashlord horse race. For different reasons, and some good, some less so. Imelda is a really good alchemist, and she's really good at doing horse tricks and stuff, but she's like from the poor district. I'm not using so much of the in-world terminology because my brain was just processing this as something else. But she's good at that stuff. Adrian is from the Reaches, or the Reach. She's an outcast who's really, really good and like has abs and stuff. And he's in as like a subverter. His job is to win this race so that he can help a group of rebels to take down the main ASHLORD loyalists. And then Pippa is in. She's a descendant of, like, her mom and her dad were both competitors in this ASHLORD race back in their day, and they both won because they competed in different years, and they've been raising her since birth to be the next winner. And so they're all in there, but they're there for their own reasons. The setting was cool, and the race followed some of the beats that I would have expected. These people team up, these people fight each other, there's some betrayal. There are some elements that you just kind of expect in a story like this, and they showed up somewhat as expected, maybe not necessarily when expected, but it was still fine, it was still enjoyable. My hang-ups were this. First off, like right out the gate, you get a chapter from Imelda's point of view, and you realize this is a world that still has digital technology in it, especially video technology, and the branded names aren't there, like the YouTube and the TikTok and stuff, but there's still very, very heavily the element of we've got to have a following, we've got to get clicks and likes and subs, and we have to have great content. Like it was directly pulled from our world and put into their world, so much so that it broke the immersion for me. And it felt like just our world with some window dressing on it. I found that just kind of obnoxious, even though it kind of played a role in the story itself, which this then kind of folds into one of my next problems with it. This book was very heavily drawing on or inspired by or echoing, whichever one of these sentiments is fair. It only came out a couple of years ago, but there are a lot of components, we'll say, of the Hunger Games and Red Rising in this book. And even, the first Red Rising book had a fair amount in common with strong components of the Hunger Games, but, I won't say that it was ripping off necessarily. It was just like, oh, okay, this is very similar to this is very similar to this. And this book had that as well. Adrian was a lot like Darrow, and Imelda was a lot like Katniss, and Pippa was a lot like any one of the tributes, or the Bolognas, we'll say, tributes from Hunger Games and Bolognas from Red Rising. So, I mean, authors can come to these elements themselves, but when the comparisons kept automatically clicking in my head, it was kind of like the YouTuber thing. It made it less immersive for me, and it just had me paying attention to other things. So it was drawing on stuff that had been done very well and very recently, and I don't know if it separated itself enough from it. Like, I feel like it didn't separate itself enough from that to stand on its own 2 feet. The other thing, this is something I'm not necessarily opposed to, when there are multiple viewpoint characters, but they're all told from first person. If the voice is distinct enough for each character, it's not a problem. And on the audiobook, they had 3 different narrators for it, which was even easier. The problem was this. Pippa's perspective was narrated in second person. And I listened to, I think, one of the Jack Reacher books earlier this year, where there were little segments of it here and there when you were getting tidbits of something from the serial killer's perspective, like Jack Reacher was hunting a serial killer. And whenever you were in the serial killer's perspective, it was written in second person, which worked well if you were trying to give the reader a sense of immersive disassociation. Like, you are in the mind of the serial killer, but the serial killer himself or herself is disassociated from what they're doing. It worked as that kind of construct. But in this setting, it was just distracting to the point of being obnoxious. I didn't really get a feel that it was necessary or constructive. Really, I felt like it was just meant as a narrative gimmick to distinguish Imelda's scenes from Pippa's scenes, because they were both teenage female protagonists that were going to compete in this race. The first person stuff for Imelda and Adrian was written in present tense. I know that there are some readers that really hate that. I'm fine with it. I think it's good. But the second person tense is a trend that just needs to go away. I feel like somebody started farting around with that more about, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And it's popping up more regularly, and it doesn't work. Like, it works for choose your own adventure books, but other than that, no. As far as the race itself, like why these people are racing and stuff, and how it ends, with stories like this, there's a limited way or a range of ways that you can surprise the reader, and if they can see the ending coming, that removes the tension and it makes it less engaging. If you're going to surprise them, you've got to have a very strong in-world reason as to why. I'm not super hyped on how the ending of this race was handled. I'm not super down on it either. It's just when it happened, it was like a beige feeling. It was just like, oh, okay. Not bad. A little bit better than not bad. It's fine. Like, it was just good enough that I'd be fine with reading a sequel sometime down the road. I'm not motivated to. I didn't dislike or unenjoy, if that's a word, the experience. I think Scott Rankin put together a book that was slightly more than adequate, and I sound rude, but that was the experience with it. It was fine, and you might enjoy it. 2 other things that I appreciated about it. One, it was pretty much a clean book. Language, sensuality, there wasn't any of that stuff in there. And 2, even with the obvious comparisons to the Hunger Games and Red Rising, this book didn't lean into a Roman aesthetic, which has become kind of the go-to thing for world building for books like this. I feel like the Roman naming conventions gained more traction in the mainstream of speculative fiction with Harry Potter. Like, all the wizards have Roman names for the most part. And then obviously Suzanne Collins was being very evocative of ancient Rome with the Hunger Games and the names for those characters. And then Red Rising was more or less the Roman Empire in space 800 years from now. And so most of those characters have Roman or Latin names. It would have been very easy for this writer in this world to go the same route, saying, "Oh, we reverted to this" or whatever. It's like, no, he didn't take that easy out. He did try to set up a unique setting, at least familiar enough to not be so jarring to the reader, but the familiar elements that did pop up were very familiar from other properties. Overall, yeah, I'd give it 3 out of 5, 6 out of 10, which is still 3 out of 5 because I can do math. Your mileage may vary. It was good enough to get a video, and just put these caveats on it that here we are. So those are my thoughts on ASHLORDS by Scott Rankin. If you've read it, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching that. To help the channel, check out my books on Amazon. Buy one, read it, tell me what you think. For October, I recommend Sleepless Hollow, a fantastic sci-fi romp with guns, ghosts, and gonzo action sequences. You can also subscribe to my Substack, where I do more detailed book reviews and longer-running projects, some of which is paywalled. Drive safe. See you out there.